This is Andrea with Parking Lot Debrief. All right, very excited to be here with my friend Greg. And we met, gosh, I don't even remember what year, years back. It's been some amount of years that we've known each other. Um, I was interpreting nationwide, doing a lot of different conferences. And you tend to run into the same deaf professionals at these conferences in whichever role they're in at that time, and they move around to different companies.
Yeah,
But I'd say what, the last 8 years or so?
at least, yeah.
10? Yeah, gosh, 10. We've run into each other quite a bit, follow each other on social media, see each other's lives and whatnot. So it made sense for you to come on the show and chat with me. And you wrote a cool article, which we will talk about that. But I'm going to hand it over to you to give a short bio of whatever you feel like sharing with people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here to talk. It's nice to catch up and to share a little bit about the journey that I've been on since I think we met at the Disability In conference many years ago, at
Hmm.
least 10 years ago. My first Disability In conference was 2011.
Oh,
So
wow.
oof, it's been a while. Yeah. So really, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Went off to college at Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, lived there for about 4 or 5 years, and then moved to Michigan and worked for a company called Dow Chemical Company. Worked
I,
there for about 7 years. During that, I moved to Louisiana to work for the same company, then moved back to Michigan, working at the same company. Then I came back here to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I am today. Worked for PNC Financial Services. I was involved very heavily with accessibility, policy, procedures. So it's funny because I started as a marketing guy. I was a PR person focusing on branding, reputation management, and having that experience and then switching to HR and policy and procedures. Such a different world. More recently, I've came to CSD, Communication Services for the Deaf, and now I'm working within a division called ASL Now. We focus on bringing direct video calling to the global community. Specifically, my mission is to help build the deaf ecosystem where a deaf person calls really any company, any agency, and say, like the IRS, Target, any of these companies, and they can pop up their video and sign with somebody that works there. They can have that direct connection, that interaction. So that's the experience that I want to see for the deaf community and for individuals like me who really want to be able to have a seamless experience. And I want that for everyone. So, in summary, about my professional background, that's that. The fun part of my life, not that that's not fun, but specifically fun, hiking, backpacking. I love football. I'm a big Steelers fan. I know a lot of the
mhm.
folks out there are going to groan and some might cheer. I'm proud to be a Pittsburgh boy. So I do a lot of traveling in my free time. I really enjoy popping all over the place and going to a lot of different conferences. So, of course, having this diversity of different experiences with interpreters, some are great, some horror stories. Happy to share those here as well.
Yeah, and that's what I thought of you because as a deaf person, as a deaf man, many interpreters, obviously we know, are women, so we'll talk about that. And your background related with work in variety of roles and companies that are typically hearing spaces in the places you've worked, meaning you have an interpreter with you in those professional settings. Now you're within a deaf company, so obviously a different experience for you. But I did want to hear, yeah, the pros and cons, the advice, the thoughts, things that you want to really hit home and say to the interpreting community. The first thing that comes to mind is I know you, Greg, personally. I'd say we know each other. You're a funny guy. You're very outgoing. You have a sense of humor. You're charismatic. You've got energy. You've got a lot of energy. And I'm just wondering, do interpreters keep up? Do interpreters match you? Because often I think interpreters are afraid to I personally love it, but many interpreters are kind of nervous with humor or cautious with it in saying the thing of, well, gosh, what if I'm wrong and I make people laugh and I wasn't supposed to? So, for who you are as you work through interpreters, and other people, I guess, what is your experience with that?
I just love that question. I mean, because not because um, it's not like we have a set of black and white rules that we can create and build around what kind of interpreter is good or bad, uh,
You can't.
skilled or unskilled. Really,
Ugh,
it varies. It so varies. So yeah, that's the $1 million question. Like, how do you determine what makes a really good interpreter? What makes a
right.
not good one? And I think that there's two parts to it. Full transparency, I don't teach in an ITP program. I'm sure there's far more involved, but for me, I can break it out into two parts. The skilled part of it,
Right.
where of course they sign well, they match correctly all the way around. They deliver the message back and forth without
Right.
any loss of information in transferring that message. The speed of keeping up, making sure they're keeping up with. So all of that is measurable, sure, easily. I think the part that is most challenging is the match.
Yeah, that
Like,
personality, that
does
vibe.
that? Yes, yes. Part of my messaging also includes the humor, uh, the dynamics. So if you know, like for me, I'm sarcastic. If I write something out sarcastic and I send it, some people take it seriously because they read it from a different voice in their head. They have a vision that this means this. No, actually, I meant something completely different, something there. And
Mhm.
I have to take a step back and say, okay, the way it's read is probably completely different. So matching with interpreters, I have different types of interpreters that I feel like fit me well. For example, if I am in a DI situation where I'm interacting with people in general, where they can see me in the same space, I don't mind having a female interpreter that's good, that's really good at what she does, or or being in an environment where an interpreter, as long as they sign well, they don't have to voice for me.
Yeah.
So that's fine. If I'm walking up on stage in front of an audience with all kinds of different people, wow, I really want to make sure that the interpreter fits me, is a male, their personality fits, the tone, the voice. Uh, and the reason why is because oftentimes when an audience is listening to a speaker, uh, tell a story. They are listening for that person's message. But if I go up on stage and I'm signing and the interpreter there is
Ugh.
not representative of me, and they're talking and they're hearing people in the audience who are listening and listening, they have to go, oh, so that's not Greg speaking, that's somebody else. And then by the time they figure that out, that they're
Hmm.
trying to sync up to my message in regards to me instead of the interpreter that they're hearing. So there's that margin, that gap there that does take effort and labor on the hearing person's part. Uh, and I don't like it. I would rather have a male interpreter that matches me, and then somebody sitting in the audience doesn't even have to think about it. An analogy I like to use is, with webcams, just, the same concept that we're using today. If someone is freezing and pausing and we're laboring to listen and we're trying to catch everything that the person says,
A lot
it's
of work.
additional work. It's a lot of brain processing. And it doesn't mean that someone who is female as an interpreter is bad. No, it just means that they're not in sync with the speaker themselves. So those are the underlying considerations that I think we often don't think about. So a lot of times we're trying to figure out who is signing what, and that makes it hard to translate.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes, to your point, what you said about having an interpreter that fits my personality, um, if someone fits my personality, I can do that deep breath. The audience is going to understand me, or even in a meeting, they'll fully understand me. I trust the interpreter trusts me. And if the interpreter has a different personality, if it becomes work for them
Mm-hmm.
to match me. And that doesn't come naturally for everyone, even for me. So I would probably never be a great actor to get up on stage because I can't separate Greg from the character that I'm supposed to be playing. And that's hard for me. If you see any videos of me, I'm always signing the exact same. So I think that's a big role. The interpreter themselves, they can be a great fit for some folks, and they're just not a great fit for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to, and oftentimes when I'm coaching interpreters, they feel deflated. I remind them, listen, this is not about you. It's just simply about the fit and the fit not being good. It doesn't mean they're a bad interpreter. It doesn't mean they need to improve anything. Sometimes it does, but really what's important is not to take that part personally.
Well, that's nice to hear directly from the horse's mouth, as you'll say, is that really, really, folks, it's not about you. It's just not a good match. I've interpreted for you several times, but right, if you're up presenting in front of a crowd, I'm not sure that I would be a great match, even though I understand you. Yes, hearing people in the crowd may not understand the interpreting process, number one. And then number two, there's already an awkward moment, like you said, a dissociation of whose voice, who is that? So, right, if the interpreter can match, whether that's culturally or gender or whatever it may be, the voice matches that person, people then kind of take it a little bit easier. I like that point. Right. I like the analogy of that webcam, that we're not like, damn you, webcam, it's the webcam's fault, but it's just not. It's just not working right in this moment for this person. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is a hard question that I've asked several deaf folks of like what makes a really great interpreter. And on Monday it means one thing, and on Friday it means something different.
Right,
And
right.
gosh, it varies for every person in every situation.
Yeah.
And obviously, the first thing you want is sign language skills.
Yeah, it's the same idea as if I'm in a meeting. When I used to work at the bank, we used a lot of financial jargon. So if that interpreter who fits me, they may not do well in that space because they don't have that institutional knowledge, that skill set. It's just not there. So of course, I will prioritize uh, content awareness, someone who has been in that group for a long time or has experience in that space. I would prioritize that more. And that interpreter who is phenomenal in front of an audience, they may not do well there.
Right. And in your work, I mean, typically you've worked mostly in hearing businesses. Have you had a choice? Have you said, I want this interpreter, and you request the same folks, or what is that process like for you? I'm
Ooh,
sure
yeah, that's a
a
great question.
struggle slash for really difficult.
Absolutely. Um, Unfortunately, we still live in a very check the box world. So if I contact an entity and I say, hey, I need an interpreter. Sometimes they will say, oh, sure, absolutely. Let me know who you want. I'll make the arrangements. More typically, they'll say, okay, I'll take care of it. And that's it.
Radio silence.
Windows closed. I hear nothing
Mm.
until we get right up and I go, so do you have somebody ready? Oh yeah. Yeah, we use an agency. And I go, okay. And they tell me
Ugh.
nothing. But then I get there at the conference and I go, oh, it's someone with no institutional knowledge, someone who just graduated from an ITP. And that becomes very challenging because when I go to a conference, I show up as a professional. I show up as an expert in my field.
Hmm.
When the time comes for networking opportunities, which is the bread and butter of conferences,
Right.
it's the butter part. I meet them and I talk to them. I'm trying to trust that the interpreter knows what I'm saying, but I can't hear her, so I can't criticize her. So I do this. Uh, it's still an uncomfortable experience because the rule of thumb is you look at the person you're talking with. But if I'm policing the interpreter at the same time and I'm trying to follow the conversation, my brain is trying to process two different things at once. So these two things happen. One, I'm not completely clear to myself what I want my message to be. I don't think well when I'm stressed out. I need to regroup myself, reorient myself in order to tell my story. And oftentimes, if I'm drifting, I don't show up well. That's the first thing. The second thing is the interpreter themselves, if they don't have the expertise, that institutional knowledge. Oftentimes, one of the best things about those conferences, like the one you and I met at, is you have the interpreter all the way through. The same
Mhm.
interpreter, you know the people. If we throw out a name, you
Yep.
already have the context there and it's ready.
It's important.
And this other person is struggling. And then what happens is the consequence impacts me, how that person I'm talking with views me. And that could be a contract opportunity.
Hmm.
That could be a partnership opportunity. That could be whoa, I
Future
need
job.
a marketing opportunity. Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, the interpreters are using dollar level words when you need a $50 word to match the conference lingo. And the blame can be placed where exactly is tough. It's hard to know where to place that blame. Obviously, the interpreter needs to prep, clearly needs to be prepared, obviously know some of the jargon that they're about to step into. Can we know everything? If you start
No.
spouting off about the Steelers players, I'll be like, shit, I don't even know what those names are. But we can try our best. But right, it gets the hardest part is the interpreter side. We think, oh my gosh, we're trying our best. We want to do our best for this situation. We're trying our damnedest. And then the deaf perspective side is, okay, your best still isn't good enough because my access for my whole life has been a fucking struggle throughout all these years. So where's the win? How do we win? And I've said this on the podcast several times that deaf people are outpacing interpreters by a landslide in terms of the work, the fields you all are in, degrees that you have. And deaf
Absolutely.
people used to didn't back in the day didn't go to college as much, didn't have degrees, so interpreters could keep up. But now we're getting an AA degree, maybe a BA, maybe a master's degree in interpreting, which is great, but that doesn't help me interpret for your financial meeting or if now maybe you're the president of something. So I don't know the answer, but deaf people are running circles around interpreters as we
Oh, yeah.
frantically try to keep up. And it's a bummer. Uh, Now there's just a lot of, deaf doctors, and those interpreters did not go to med school themselves. So where does that blame fall? I don't know. That's just food for thought. I don't know the answer.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think it's more of, um, hmm. So we have patience for, there are, red, yellow, and green in terms of what we are comfortable with, what we feel safe with.
Hmm.
So if something is, I know that person, I know their skills, and they're a fit, they're a personality fit, uh, they can learn fast, absolutely, I'm bringing them in. If I know the interpreter is technically not inept, I'm not going to pick that person. But going back to your question about the conference itself, if I'm relying on the conference itself to figure out my interpreting services, then what happens is they ask an agency to figure it out for them.
Hmm.
And the agency themselves doesn't have that level of knowledge of the conference. So what it feels like. So the challenge becomes that I have to go and use I hate to say use this word, but use their watered down solution, if you will,
Hmm.
because I am the actual client. I don't have an opportunity to pick my interpreters. In an ideal world, every deaf person can identify and select their spirit interpreter and bring that interpreter everywhere with them. And I'm so jealous of those celebrity deaf folks who have their own designated interpreter because they have the interpreter all the way through.
Get to that Marley Mountain
And
status and you got
yeah,
it.
yeah, it's my dream is to be that. That's what I want to. But really, again, there's just not enough interpreters for that.
Yeah.
So also we have to honor the fact that interpreters themselves are spread out. They're spread thin. And I think another huge challenge is today with virtual workspaces, interpreters can choose to never leave their house. That is great for interpreters, but a bummer for deaf folks.
Is it? So I want to ask at the end of the day, though, I am maybe working virtually. I'm still interpreting. I'm still providing services. It's not like I'm sitting home and saying, well, fuck that. I'm not going to provide any
Right.
services. But yes, yes, yes. I understand that when I sit home, that means then the local community is not getting served by those services that because those far away people can't come to my local community that I am living in. So I understand that part of the argument, but I sometimes fight back against that and say, well, I'm still providing interpreting services, period. If I didn't interpret virtually, maybe there wouldn't be others to do that. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. The service is important. I think that it's not about the fact that the interpreter is not providing the service, but it's using conferences again because we were just talking about that. The best part of conferences is the networking, going around and meeting people. Most conferences today are trying to have interpreters for the breakout sessions only,
Bye bye
and
during break.
people, right? Yeah, it's just that opportunity disappears. So people don't go to conferences for breakout sessions. I'm sorry to say it. They only care about they don't only care about the workshops. They care about who they can meet there. Otherwise,
Hmm.
I would also stay home and just watch from my laptop.
Hmm.
So I think that the challenge there is what about those nuanced experiences where I need to socialize and I want to have a live person who can walk with me because that iPad experience,
Mm,
which is becoming more and more common, feels
awkward.
very disconnected.
I can't hear.
Yeah,
All that stuff.
great for some situations where if I'm checking into a hotel, I'm at the airport. Yeah, sure,
Mm,
I get that. But at the same time, for that, it's work, it's boots on the ground experience.
hmm.
And it's more and more difficult and challenging to prepare for those kinds of experiences and still be connected. If there were more interpreters going into the field, well, it, I'm not criticizing. There's pros and cons. Um, it has its space.
Yeah, and I had Kyle Duarte on. He coordinates a lot of interpreters for conferences nationwide, and we actually talked about this of the concept of staffing a conference versus coordinating a conference. And
Yes.
that was a big part of it is the networking, because people think, well, I just interpreted a 2 hour session. I need to go to the bathroom during break. Right. The schedulers should be scheduling around this so people can have interpreters during break and you can get a break, period. So there are solutions. So, yeah, we definitely are thinking about that.
Yeah.
So, which leads me then to talk about you work with a wide variety of interpreters, the good, the bad, the ugly. Um, and when did you publish this article? Just right.
I think it was about a month ago, maybe
Yeah. So
three
not too
weeks, a
long
month ago.
ago. It's posted on LinkedIn, and I'll put the link in the show notes here. But David actually sent this to me and said, you got to talk with Greg about this. And I was like, deal, of course. Um, and I love this concept, but I'm going to be truthful here and vulnerable. When we talked briefly before this, before the article, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling feelings. I had feelings when I read the article. I immediately, as a human, felt a little bit of, no, well, not me, a
Horrible.
little bit of defensiveness. And I noticed some defensiveness. I asked myself, why am I feeling that? So maybe give us a little summary of what this article was about for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you opened with I felt that defensiveness, and then I took a look and analyzed it. Like that's what it's meant to do. Some people will read this and be like, nope, defensive. Absolutely not. That's not me.
Yeah.
It can't be me. That is just wrong. And that's okay. Everyone has their own truth. But the intention of the article was to bring up that defense, identify it. What is this?
Yeah.
Why do I feel this? And I think that really, I wrote the article because I was in general frustrated with one simple concept. Uh, I didn't have a label for it, so I called it the dignity defense. The dignity defense.
Yeah.
And it was intended to label that behavior, intentional or unintentional, the behavior of I'm standing up and I'm presenting, and I know something is going wrong with the interpreter, but the interpreter creates that, pretends that nothing happened.
Yep.
I'm up there signing and signing and signing, and they miss something, and they decide to make up their own to keep going. And that changes my message. Again, intentional or unintentional. But typically, when I'm signing and I'm presenting and I'm signing with intent, I'm signing with every word that I sign means something.
And you're pretty particular about your message. And I mean, literally, look at you.
Yes,
You're giving us every single word that you want us to say. So,
yes. And I try to, because when I'm signing with purpose. And I was just in a conference where I had to present to an audience, a group of folks, group of people, and I'm signing away, signing away. I felt like I was on a roll. People are nodding, people are supporting, agreeing, and I felt the buzz in the room, you know? And then as we got closer to the end, I noticed that one person hearing and knows signs who was signing to me, they're not catching you. They're not catching you. So I had to go back and reframe what I had just said. I felt that pop, that trigger of I wish the interpreter that I was working with had told me. Why didn't they tell me, hey, I missed, wait, I'm behind you a little bit. Maybe I'm signing too fast. I signed fast. I own up to that part too. But I did go, oh, they missed the important part. And at the end of my presentation, that person came up to me and said, hey, you're signing in that concept. They didn't translate that. And that was the core concept that I
mm.
was trying to communicate. But the interpreter themselves was just rolling along through it. And the worst part for me is that was an interpreter that I trusted. So I know that I've known this person for many years. They've seen me many times before. So I thought about this a lot. What is it what is that action there of just to keep talking because I don't want
Mask
to
it over. Yeah.
miss them, like, because I don't want to be that person who stops the presentation, goes, hey, I didn't understand you, because if I do that, everybody looks at me, I am not, and sees me as not a good interpreter. That fear of I messed up, so others will no longer trust me. And I get it. I get it. I get the fear. I appreciate it. And I acknowledge the fear of not being perceived as a good interpreter because, both deaf and other interpreters are in a
Are
rush,
harsh. Yeah.
are
They're harsh.
harsh. They're harsh animals. They're harsh animals. They're very harsh. So oftentimes that pressure is on them to show up and look like they're interpreting just fine. The challenge in those scenarios becomes, how does the deaf person hold people accountable to my message? Because if I'm translating something wrong and it's not accurate, then what happens is the person who is supposed to be receiving the message receives it differently. A one-time thing may be no big deal. When it happens over and over and over and over, this all compounds and compounds to not just a one-time
From your whole
mistake.
life.
It's not just a one and done experience. It is the the earnings, the debt, what I call the debt, the communication debt, where the message itself evolves, it changes inch by inch until it's so different from the original message. And hearing people walk out with a completely different understanding of what the deaf person was really trying to say during that time. Because the audience in that moment, for me, missed a core concept that I was trying to communicate. The rest of my presentation means something completely different now.
Hmm.
So that impacts me in a huge way. And the interpreter walks out just fine.
Yeah.
There's no one even noticed that. And I use the word dignity very intentionally, because if you walk out, you are protected, but you have an unintentional, or again, maybe intentionally, you've hurt the deaf person. You've passed that dignity to the deaf person, or that loss of dignity to the deaf
Hmm.
person. And now the deaf person has to make up for it.
True.
Once I've lost that 1 hour of time in a room with people, I can't go over this concept again, but I can cross paths with them again at someday, and maybe then I can reorient or redirect their understanding of what I was trying to convey. And I mean, yeah,
You
it's
have to repair, you have to make up that
yes,
debt.
absolutely.
Why do you think interpreters do that?
That's another great question. Um, I think it goes back to what I was saying about the feeling of pressure, of perspective, hearing people view the interpreter as a good interpreter or a bad interpreter. They don't want to interrupt and be the brick wall to everything the audience is receiving, prioritizing fluency over clarity,
Mm,
and trying to look as competent as possible. I don't think it's malicious, but they are intentionally protecting themselves and not wanting to admit to being confused, because again, it's fear. I'm afraid of how people will look at me. I'm afraid of how the deaf person will look at me as an interpreter. So I bluff. And when that happens, I become responsible for fixing it.
mhm,
And it's easy. I think I've noticed often that when an interpreter has a tag team, and that someone is holding them accountable, they become a little bit more willing to go, wait, I need clarity, or
mhm.
I've got to fix this. Uh, they are held accountable by their peer. But if I'm alone with an interpreter there and I'm on a VRS call or I'm in a meeting, I can't police you. I can't go, hey, that's not what I said. I can't criticize you. So it's easier for the interpreters to go, oh, I just bluff through it and keep going. Because I think the feeling is that they start with shame. If it happens uh, that I know that they messed up, they feel shame and decide it's not worth addressing.
Mm.
They would rather push it aside. But sometimes that pushing it aside pushes it aside and it goes to the deaf person. They take it
Yeah.
off of their shoulder and the deaf person bears that burden.
Right. That is bared on the deaf person, but then that leaves the hearing person with an impression of, well, this deaf person doesn't make sense. Because, I mean, I promise you, hearing people are not thinking, oh, it probably was the interpreter or the interpreting process. They don't probably automatically think that. And it made me think, I've had this conversation often on the podcast as well. Interpreters often are first fearful to take a mic and speak and interpret into English for someone on stage, but we have no problem standing on stage and signing to the crowd. And the reason being because if you have a deaf presenter signing and I'm speaking English to a large hearing crowd, how many folks here can hear us and hear my English mistakes? We can hear our own English mistakes in the way we speak the English sentences. But when we're working into ASL, I can't step outside of my body and watch myself sign. I can't see myself. I can't see my mistakes
Yeah.
often. And the only person who's catching, maybe, those mistakes, probably not because they don't get the source message, the deaf person is catching my ASL mistakes. So one person catching mistakes, I'm not as embarrassed versus a whole crowd with a microphone of, oh shit, they can hear me in my bad English. So I've always talked about that and emphasized that both of those spaces are important and they bear the same weight. And that that nervous feeling or interpreter's emphasis should be maybe the other way around of that we can struggle through English and hearing people will make sense
Yeah.
of it versus the other way around. And as you said, your situation, having another hearing person who can kind of clue in and say, hey, this interpreter's not catching it. How often does that actually happen? How often are there captions for you to catch the interpreter said shit wrong?
Yes.
Most of the time, not. Um, you're the only one in a room of hearing people. So when I read the article, I thought, oh, I don't do that. I always interrupt. And no, I don't. I don't. And sometimes, as interpreters, we do not interrupt because I go, okay, I know I missed this. I'm going to fill it in. I'm going to fix it later. I'm going to add, oh, I added it in because I figured out in context what it was. I can work my magic. And sometimes that magic works, and sometimes it does not.
Yep.
Sometimes, even later, I'm like, crap, I missed that way back there and I couldn't fit it back in. And maybe I can clarify later. But often we sign this sign like fluff over or fudge over or mask when we drop that information or if we say a sentence that may not make sense that maybe or make it make sense but it wasn't correct at all. Sometimes that's an appropriate approach. Most of the time it is not. Mostly what we're talking about here is working from ASL into English and how we may mess that up. But and the other thing you said is first things first. You will require an interpreter that knows they're making those
Right
mistakes.
there.
Many
Yep.
interpreters are like, oh, I didn't even realize. Oh, I've been going in left field and I'm way off on your message. They can't even fix it because they don't know.
Yep.
So that's obviously number one. I'd say it's 50-50 or more than not, but people just don't even know they're making those mistakes,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah,
the
definitely.
problem. You have to have the skill to know you're messing it up.
Yeah. So I'd like to believe that no one walks into a situation like this with malicious intent. No
Right.
one wants to cause harm. Well, I say no one. I'm sure there are people who have harmful intentions, but the point is that most situations that doesn't happen. I do believe that a lot of these mistakes are subconscious.
Yeah.
They don't realize they are doing it even. They may know that they missed a word, but they were too busy here trying to translate that they eliminated that from their process. So I do believe that most of the time it is subconscious. And also, interpreters aren't trained to self-police.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily told
That's why we have
what
teams.
their role is, right? Right. That's why you have teams to come in and make sure that the messaging is efficient and clear and being shared as intended. So that subconscious, even though it is typically no big deal, it builds up.
Hmm.
And understand, like I said before, it doesn't build up for the interpreter, it builds up for the deaf person.
And the impression builds up on those hearing people about deaf people. More so, kind of an internal feeling. Yeah, deaf people don't trust interpreters, understandably.
Yeah, it requires so much trust between the deaf person and the
Hmm.
interpreter that for a deaf person to say, I trust this person is representing me and reflecting me well. So in that situation, I do remember I felt triggered and really struggled with why this person didn't just ask or interrupt
Hmm.
because they obviously were struggling. So then I had to label that. I had to figure out what it means. So how do I claim my own dignity when a situation like this comes up? Because the burden is now on me to figure out, whoa, where is the miss? What didn't translate properly? And now I'm wondering what that person in the audience thinks of me. What is their view of me as a person? And now I have to figure out that part.
Yeah.
So that becomes a little bit more of a burden for me. So if there was not a hearing person in the audience that knew sign language,
Yep.
I would have never have known. The amount of privilege for an interpreter,
Power.
ooh, power. Yeah, the power they have. The interpreter has to be able to make a mistake and just go, okay. And I was fortunate in that situation, but it did make me really struggle. And it's what inspired me to write the article. My goal wasn't to be accusatory of interpreters. I just wanted them to think that, oh, yeah, if I'm not interrupting, if I'm not asking for clarification, the message is being translated differently. So, and oftentimes an interpreter may say, well, I can't disrupt the flow of the meeting or the flow of the conversation. And that's true also.
Sometimes.
But sometimes asking the deaf person, do you prefer that I say something wasn't clear, or do you want me to just keep going? There's some situations where I will tell the interpreter, just be as unnoticeable as possible.
Hmm.
I don't want people to notice that I'm in the room because of an interpreter's interruption. Everybody knows me as the deaf person. So sometimes I like that. Okay, this part isn't important. In but in that situation, the message was important. So it was different.
Well, and it makes me think, especially when deaf presenters, I personally like to interrupt, mostly because I like the audience to know this message is being interpreted, y'all. This is
There you go.
Andrea's
Yes.
speaking, but this deaf person is speaking through me. This is a translation interpretation. This is a process. I'm going to stumble. It may not be perfect. And sometimes I want that interpretation process clearly shown to folks as we move through it just fine.
Yes.
But just so people know that it's not me talking, that this is a hard process.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you said that because there's also that is also so important. I was talking with a hearing person. I'm talking with hearing people all the time about VRS, about TRS. Part of my job really is doing that. I talk about the process of me calling an interpreter, the interpreter then making the phone call for me, and then I go to them. That goes to the hearing person, then back through the interpreter. And hearing people don't get that. They
No.
don't. It's very uncomfortable because they always feel like they're talking to somebody else on the phone. But when the interpreter is in the room listening to a deaf person through an interpreter, they are processing the deaf person. They're not processing the interpreter in their head. So when the interpreter interrupts, it tells the hearing person, oh, that's right. That's right. The interpreter is translating for the deaf person. So therefore, it's not a
Right.
100%
Might not be.
exactly what the deaf person's saying. So it can be a teachable moment for hearing people
Yeah.
as well. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that the interpreter will view it
Yeah.
as a negative experience, a negative thing, a negative view on them. But
Well,
it's
I mean, if
not.
you're interrupting 500 times, yes, girl. Sorry. That's you're not a
Yes.
match
Yeah.
for the situation. But if you have to clarify here and there, I think also I do want to remind interpreters, students, and folks, I guess just anyone in general, that communication and language is not perfect. No one speaks perfect sentences all the time. Um, and TED Talks are the only ones that are like laid out perfectly
Yes.
because they've rehearsed that. And that's a special type of rehearsal and delivery. But communication is messy.
Oh,
Words
yes.
get jumbled. Does that mean all of your mistakes are excusable? Not by any means, but giving ourselves just a little flexibility of like, hold on one second. Okay. And then getting that sentence out clearly. It's okay, y'all. We're human. Work through it and move through
Yes.
it.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
get rid of that shame. I'm kind of over all that.
that's also a huge part of it. Recognizing that we are both human.
Yes.
I may have a bad morning. Uh, Maybe my dog was sick in the morning and I'm upset thinking about that. And then you may have just had to work a 911 call. And then you come and we're working together and my bad day matches with your bad day and it changes a message. And even me, and I don't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning all the time and think to myself, shit, I should have said that, or I shouldn't have said that. It doesn't, I didn't show up for myself. That was not my best moment. That's okay. We all have that.
Yeah.
And with us, the risk doubles. Maybe not doubles, but it increases,
Yeah.
right? You might not be at your best. I might not be at my best. So that's why it's also important to make sure that we are telling each other when we're not showing up so that we can work together as a team to make sure the messaging is there, that this is what I meant to say. And hearing people have to eventually recognize that this is a very human process, but they don't if the interpreter if the interpreter covers up bluffs their way through, then hearing people walk away thinking that was 100%
Hmm.
the deaf person.
Right. Right. And one thing I just jotted down while you were talking is in my life, I have learned it's taken me some time, but there can be two truths that happen at the same time. We can be causing harm to the deaf community by masking and bluffing our way through, whether we intend or not in our interpretation. Harm builds up, trauma is happening. And at the same time, the other truth is, man, we're trying our best. And sometimes we fuck up and we try to fix it
Yep.
and but both are true. And I think some people are saying, no, it's this, we have caused harm, or it's this, and can't help it. Interrupting to clarify, asking for clarification, obviously we need to do so, but there's a lot to unpack in terms of that part. So I think it's okay to hold both truths that harm is happening and interpreting is hard, period. Both. And we need to look at
Both
all of
can
these
be true.
things.
Yes. Yeah, both can be true. And what also can be true is I can be signing too fast,
Yeah.
or I can
And I
be
suck today. I
signing
don't
not,
know.
yeah. So there's a lot of variables. And I think that sometimes that interruption plays a big role, a bigger role than just criticizing the interpreter. But it makes me think, okay, I need to slow down. And I do often. I won't lie. When I started presenting, I was clear. And then I get
Same.
excited and
Hearing
then
people do it. They talk
yeah,
fast, they go all over the place. And yeah. And you're right. I like the thought that interruptions or clarifications have wonderful implications, sure. I think ego plays a part in it too. Of oh, this is about me, how embarrassing, and really, it's not about you. Relax. If you are, like I said, interrupting all the time, then it is about you. I always have to make sure that's clear. Of like, well, I'll interrupt all the time. I'm a great interpreter. I'm like, well, actually, not. It's not that.
yeah. And I do think oftentimes that it does have a direct connection to someone's ego. If they're not willing to interrupt, if they're
Yeah.
not willing to self-critique, if they're not willing to admit that, yes, I missed something, I should uh, reach out and say you weren't clear. Uh, this can often be tied to ego. And again, I said in the beginning of this conversation, there's so much pressure on the interpreter from the deaf person, from the other interpreters in the room. We're not in a very nice space. We're in a space that is very easily criticized. And we all have pressure to show up as the best version of ourselves all the time. And that's not possible.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. You get exhausted. It's hard.
Human.
And we do it every day. So I think that's the big part of it, the ego. we have to not get rid of it. It plays an important role, sure, but minimize the role that it plays.
Notice it, be aware of it, take a look inside. You have some good quotes here on our notes that I'd like you to mention.
Yeah, well, there's two things that I think we're talking about. When I'm talking with people, it's not just about what I'm saying, it's actually how it sounds, how it feels. The audience sees me, but they hear someone else. And if that tone and the energy doesn't match, it creates a disconnect. A really good interpreter, I would like to say, it ties to what we're talking or what we were talking about before, mirrors who you are. They mirror your repetitiveness. They mirror your process, your storytelling, your intention as well. Because our intentions don't always show up in words. Our intention can show up in our messaging.
Mhm.
So go ahead.
Well, yeah, it brought to mind. I understand newer interpreters obviously are in survival mode of just understanding the signs. Yeah, they're just figuring it out of catching what the sign language is. Then you level up and you learn, like, okay, I understand sign language. I can play with this a little bit more. And as you get better through the years, it takes time, it takes skill, it takes exposure, practice. But I often talk about with other interpreters. There's several wonderful interpreters who've worked for several years who can say words when they watch sign language, but you sound like a robot
Yes,
or you sound like the message is interpreted.
there you go.
This person's trying to fit into this situation. You have to sound like this other guy who's talking about baseball,
Yeah,
or maybe up the register to match the words and lingo of others in this business meeting. So I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves. Is interpreters think they're doing great because they can say English words of the signs that
yes,
are signed, but it sounds awful or it
yep,
sounds very
definitely.
roughly interpreted. Um, the level in which we need to level up. That's part of our role, to match into interpret into hearing culture, to sound like we're speaking English in a normal way. Um, I host a workshop on this, but if a deaf person signs this sign for curious, not every time do we have to say curious. You can say, "Hey, I have a question,"
Yes,
or whatnot, depending on the situation and what the intent is. One sign does not mean one word you must use
yep,
every single time. So kind of just feeling it out, that bothers me. Yeah.
yeah. I I I agree with you. Our signs don't always reflect exactly what we want to say. So, for example, I'll often use this. Sometimes the interpreters will say move up, which I find annoying, or they say advance, but I want to escalate.
I mean, that's hard because there's a whole
I'm
slew of
ready
words, and I'm
to,
like, which
right.
one should I say?
Yes. So, how do you fit?
You better have it on your mouth for me to say.
For me as a deaf person, it's oftentimes, challenging. How do I prioritize clarity, not fluency? I think, and really, it comes down to the interpreter thinking about what does a person need or what does a person,
What is the meaning here? Right.
yeah, what do they mean? And that is accessibility when the interpreter is actually thinking about the deaf person. So I always like to say that accessibility itself, if you do poorly, it's not access. It's the opposite of access. But access does well is equality in action. Equality looks like you get me, we are synchronized, and we are not de-escalating my my language. It's equity when the person gets it. When the deaf person is tries to or did say this, so now I get it. The hearing person understands it. This is a translated message from the interpreter translating the deaf person. That becomes clear. I get what the deaf person is trying to say. That is access and equality in action.
And I like that because I think a lot of interpreters think I'm providing access. Look at this. Everyone understands. And I'm like,
Yes.
you're giving the deaf person, you should give them half your paycheck because they're doing a lot of work for you.
Yes. Yes. I mean, so well, and we don't get any credits from our interpreters. Um, it's fascinating because, again, I want to really stress that interpreters play a very important role in our society. They did not enter this field because they wanted to cause harm. No. I think a lot of times interpreters are under a lot of pressure to show up as a good interpreter.
Yeah.
And what makes a good interpreter? We said like there's a laundry list. There's so many different things. And oftentimes, any mistakes or feeling of making a mistake, it feels like this isn't access.
Yeah.
No, access is when you make sure that the deaf person is keeping their dignity,
Holistic. Yeah.
that the deaf experience isn't just about needing access. I need a facilitated message. No, I need to keep my dignity in the situation. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm going to the bank to open up my first bank account, or if I'm going to a show to watch, I don't know, if I'm going to a show to watch uh, uh, Black Sabbath, I want to make sure that I'm included in that event. I want to experience the full sense of that. And I have been seeing, and I have seen out there and understand the process in real time. But to be able to prevent that dignity loss, I show up as a person and not feel like I walked away like, oh, I didn't, people didn't understand me. I felt like I just become the black sheep. I'm anxious about with that. I feel the angst. People are, it's not about shame on you. It's the interpreter didn't play the role of protecting my dignity, protecting my humanity. And again, unintentional. I think so often the interpreters think my job is passing that message back and forth. It's not. Your job is to protect the deaf person's dignity and make sure that they can participate.
Well, allowing you to show up as a whole person, and that makes me think that uh, you have all that like commentary in your head, and you go, and I'm thinking, how do I see this the right way? You're an educated deaf person, quote unquote, elite deaf. You have privilege in many ways as who you are. There are several deaf people who do not have any of that, and we're causing harm to you, Greg, as a deaf professional with all the privilege you have. Imagine the harm that we're causing to those who don't even recognize the harm we're
Oh,
causing,
yes.
who aren't able to even call it out on us, who don't even take on an interpreter and say the things, and they're kind of captured by all of this harm.
Yeah, I feel for those deaf folks who, an example of that, they go to get a loan, uh, open a mortgage, they buy a car, and the people who are selling know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They know every trick in the book. They can put in all these bluff numbers and make it so confusing. They already make it confusing for me,
Me
and I
too.
worked in a bank. They make it confusing intentionally in order to make it difficult for anyone, any customer out there to understand the process of information this whole of information that they're looking at. If the interpreter doesn't have that content, then the deaf person definitely doesn't.
Hmm.
So I feel for those folks who are exploited, who are not given a fair opportunity to have someone who really knows this stuff looking at it and say, don't do it. Or maybe you should think about this, or maybe you should ask this relevant question. Not everyone has that. And the worst part is, as an interpreter, even if you know, you can't say it.
Right?
Ethics,
Can't. Do we
you
sometimes? Absolutely.
could.
Wink,
Yeah.
but in different ways. A wink or a facial expression. And sometimes, I'll be honest, I think that is part of our role. Honestly, sometimes I to make that implicit tone. Clearly this vibe, their tone is manipulative. Ugh, they feel like they're trying to take advantage of you. I can hear it. I can hear it in their voice as a hearing person. I can feel it in their words. I feel like that is hearing knowledge. I know this, so I'm going to make that explicit in sign language. Does not mean I'm breaking rules, but I feel like, I don't know. I'm not saving the deaf person at all. I feel like that that tone is there, and we as hearing people know
Yep.
that. I'm going to make sure that's included in my message. And I often, I said, I'll say, you're getting taken advantage of. They're trying to, and I'm like, that's your choice to continue. Well, I'll love to interpret. But sometimes and it's not my job to babysit this deaf
Right.
person in any sort of way. But I can be like, they seem this way, and then continue interpreting. I think that's within our role and our message.
And I agree. There's many ethical professors that
It's
would disagree
sticky.
with me,
Oh, I'm sure
but
many disagree with me.
I
Rip up my
absolutely
certification, y'all. That's fine. Eek.
uh, I'll put in a good word for you, Brady. I'm the deaf person on this call. No one
Yikes.
better tear up her certification.
Ugh.
But but as a deaf person, I fully support that kind of behavior where if it can be seen, heard,
Yes.
and felt, it should be communicated and translated.
And sometimes that implicit message is not made explicit. And as an interpreter, we need it to be.
Yeah,
We need to interpret that way.
because you have full access to
Yes.
that message or that vibe where
Yes.
I might not. So one of the challenges is being a deaf person is that I don't have all the social cues.
Right.
So I didn't grow up hearing, listening to my grandparents talk to each other. I didn't hear how my father talked to his staff. I didn't have access to going into a restaurant. I didn't hear the manager yelling at the waiter. So these different areas of what we call osmosis, I can't bring that information into me. So I don't have full access to any situations, really. So in a situation where I am sitting with some banker who is trying to convince me to accept this mortgage agreement, and inside the language, there's a balloon clause that I didn't know about. If I don't have the skills to catch that, and the person seems very pressuring to go ahead and sign, and I'm hoping the interpreter is going to give me a cue of some kind, like
I'll just,
some kind of a cue.
sometimes I say that they're pushing you. They're pushy
Yeah,
with their
even
language.
even if it's not intentional to change their mind, but hey,
Right.
go home
Notification. Yes.
and ask someone else because I don't need to decide right now. I can go home. I can ask a an uncle or a sister, or I can reach out and say, "Hey, can you take a look at this and help me out so that I can better understand this, so that I don't have to sign anything today." So I think, if anything, it helps me pause and think and say, "Okay, this is not a hurry." It's so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Ah, we're coming up on an hour. I mean, this platform is for interpreters, hearing deaf interpreters, all around, but anything you've ever wanted to just bluntly or directly say to interpreters, things that we need to know or hear. I mean, we've covered a lot already, but any last little tidbits?
Yeah, so I think one important thing that I would really want to stress, I've said a lot about the challenges that deaf people experience with interpreters. Anyone who's translating a message back and forth, really, it probably feels or seems like the goal is to criticize, or the goal is to just shoot them all up. It's so important that I I I recognize that this is hard. It is not black and white. It's very gray. And I hope that anyone out there who feels that defensive, that angst, will pause and say, why? Why do I feel that? The intent with this conversation is not to insult them. They may feel like that for a certain reason, and recognize that a lot of that comes from pressure from deaf folks as well. Or deaf folks aren't always nice. I'm not always nice.
Yes, you
Sometimes I've
are.
had a bad day. I try, but a lot of the work that I do, my passion really is around making the world better and more accessible of a place. I do think that interpreters continue to play an important role in that. And I really hope that it becomes more deaf centric, uh, how we make sure that that person is elevated throughout the world as if they're just another person, without the capital D deaf label showing up in neon lights above our head. Because if I go to the bank, I don't want to be there. If I'm in the doctor's office, I don't want to be there. So the barriers that I struggle with, or the tension with interpreters, sometimes it's not only them.
Right. It's a history of
It's
stuff.
I just need support in the journey and traveling in that experience and getting through it. And I think that's important.
And then that leads to, I always ask folks to spotlight a deaf organization or deaf owned business. And you're at CSD. CSD um, is a way you can get rid of interpreters. You can talk directly with deaf people.
I love that question because oftentimes it's people will say, "Yeah, I know, Greg, he just wants to get rid of all the interpreters," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. That is the wrong mission. I actually want to make life better for everyone, including interpreters."
Yeah.
But yeah, communication services for the deaf. I'm very proud to be with them. Uh, in November, it's going to be 50 years old. It was established 50 years ago in South Dakota. It's the largest deaf-led social impact organization in the world. Almost everyone knows the logo.
Yeah.
Almost everyone knows they exist. They've been involved in being creative in the telecommunication access space for all of their 50 years. I think that CSD's objectives have changed over the years. But one thing that has continued and continues to be true is the focus on telecommunication access and making sure that telecommunication access keeps pace with what is possible. In the 1970s, the TTY was being developed and distributed across the country. That was part of CSD's mission. We were an interpreting agency and a relay center. There was actually a relay service provider for a long time, CSD was. And then in the 80s, we established many captioning relay centers. AIM from back in the 90s and the
Mhm.
early 2000s, AIM and AOL. We worked in partnership with Sprint to provide that. At the time when the TTY was developed, the TTY only worked if the other person had a TTY. So that created a challenge of, if I can't call you, then I can't call you.
Yeah.
So CSD developed and established the first relay center by coming up with a simple concept of, let's just hire hearing people. We'll put them in front of a TTY. The hearing person can call and type back and forth with the deaf person to distribute communication access. And then it was probably the early 2000s, we started the first VRS company. Really, it was based on a very similar model of the TTY relay. And now the challenge was there was always a third person in the conversation. So VRS has continued for 25 years, but now we live in a world where everyone has Zoom meetings, everybody has FaceTime. We have all these different things. So now uh, we we came up with a concept called direct video calling. And really, it's a new communication model that no one will ever think of, getting rid of the interpreters. No,
I
I
mean,
don't want to.
direct
I just want to
communication.
pull them out. Let the company and the agencies themselves hire folks who
Deaf
know
people
sign
get
language.
jobs. Yes.
Yes. And
Imagine.
deaf people with jobs still need interpreters.
Yeah.
So win-win. So oftentimes people will say, "Oh, Greg, you just want to get rid of all the interpreters." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. We're trying to create a world where I can access everything and still have interpreters. We do also have a nationwide shortage of interpreters. So putting deaf folks in a space where they can become the uh, interactor with the other deaf person is also a position of power. It empowers them to have access as well. It opens up interpreters and it makes it the world more accessible to other opportunities as well. So CSD has been partnering with Comcast, with Xfinity, with Google, 998, the suicide hotline, allowing deaf folks to call directly and interact with a person, someone who works there, instead of having to call and go through a relay operator. So really, we
Exciting.
envision a goal uh, where to have that real-time direct uh, understanding that hearing people have in receiving
Nice.
services. It's not about removing interpreters themselves. I think that really um, there's great opportunities to improve the experience for both.
Yeah. No offense taken. All good. But
Yeah, we'll always need you.
yeah, but thank you so much for your time, your considerations and thoughts about the interpreting process. Some deaf people think about it, some deaf people don't think about it. So I appreciate your well thought out written article. It was written in a way that didn't feel accusatory or coming at interpreters, but it did invoke feelings. And I go, huh, oh, do I do those things? So it was a good conversation piece. I think it's good for anyone in ITPs or instructors to bring up for a conversation with students. So I'll put a link in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and sharing vulnerably your experiences.
Yeah, thank you for giving me a space to be able to have this conversation and for being open to the interactions. Of course, for our audience, I hope that this conversation is enlightening. If it is creating angst, I hope that they'll analyze it, they'll sit with it, learn more about why those feelings happen. And I hope that this inspires conversations going forward as well. I'll
Yeah.
keep an eye out for comments and what folks are saying when they share the video. Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah. Thanks so much.